Ladies and gentlemen, let me open a special meeting of the City Council, City of Pearland for Monday, April the 30th, 2018. I think we're about used up this month. There'll be another month starting next week, so we'll be back in business. Moving in our agenda, purpose of the meeting is council input and discussion regarding the tax incremental retirement reinvestment zone 2, which is TIRZ, fiscal year bond program and package, and debt service rate. And we intend to have mostly a discussion option, and I'll ask our city manager, Ray Pearson, to take over and lead us through this process.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council, and appreciate the extra time here. This is an extension of one of the early budget input meetings, the white papers we had in February, when we talked about a future bond issue for our capital needs. And when we got into this, it really struck us that we needed to carve out some dedicated time to dive into this topic, these topics a little bit. So Trent Epperson and a lot of other folks, Cynthia Pearson, have worked on a presentation for you tonight, but hoping to get some consensus or feedback on these topics that you mentioned as in the title. Just logistical things. Before you, I handed out, and hate adding paper at your tables, but one item is something that is not a stranger. That's a March memo regarding the 2007 bond package status update, just for reference to show the progress and the background on that. And then the other package is the PowerPoints. We sent those out on Friday, but based on some questions and a few additional information items, we did add a couple of slides in there, and Trent will try to point those out, but it's substantially what you saw on Friday, but that's for your reference as we go along here. So just to get into it, I'll ask Trent Epperson to lead us through the presentation, and I'll add in as we go along.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Good evening, Mayor and Council members. As Clay mentioned, we're going to cover several topics tonight, all kind of related and in and around the proposed 2019 bond program. We're going to cover tax incremental reinvestment zone number 2 and the potential projects it can fund, which would then relieve those from being in a bond, the 2019 bond program. The 2019 bond program itself, which Mr. Robert Upton, he's going to cover the slew of projects that we've gathered over the years and have been proposed over the years that are currently unfunded. Then we'll look at the debt service rate impacts associated with that, and then we're looking for some direction based on recommendations tonight so that we can move into our next steps of pursuing the 2019 bond program. With that, I'm going to start with what is a TIRZ, Tax Increment Reinvestment Zone. It's basically an economic development tool available under Texas law where you designate a specific geographic area for a duration of 30 years, where you take the base taxes at that point, based on the assessed value at that point, that sets your floor or your base, and the additional value that's created by development in the zone is your incremental taxes. Those incremental taxes go back into the zone and are considered captured funds that go back into it to pay for several things within the zone. So here we created TIRZ 2 in 1999, so it expires in 2029. What can you use those captured proceeds for? Streets, drainage, utilities, and other public facilities. The underlying concept, again, is that you take the incremental taxes and you reinvest those within the zone. Your developer, or if the city does any projects, has to advance those funds to develop those projects, and then they're later reimbursed once the proceeds are, the TIRZ starts creating proceeds from the additional assessed value. It's not a tax abatement situation, and again, it's the taxes on the base value continue to flow to the city's general fund for regular citywide use. Additionally, within TIRZ 2, the amount of the incremental taxes that flow to the TIRZ versus directly to the city has decreased over the years by the way it was originally created. So earlier in there was more of the incremental taxes going into the TIRZ. Now we're at about 36% of the incremental taxes going into the TIRZ, whereas the rest of it comes to the city. and that's done by our TIRZ, the fee that the TIRZ reimburses the city on every year. So the size and location, TIRZ 2 is approximately 33,467 acres. Generally encompasses the Shadow Creek Ranch development. It was expanded a couple of times early in its creation. The participants, of course, City of Pearland, as well as the two counties, Brazoria County and Fort Bend County, as well as Alvin ISD. So through 2016, from when it started, the contributions by the different entities into the TIRZ, Fort Bend County and Brazoria County, the smallest, at about just under $6 million, and 15.5 for Brazoria County, and then the city, $40 million, and then Alvin ISD, just shy of $55 million. This is through 2016. So the city retained property taxes through that based on the increased valuation in there, and the base value we started with is a little bit shy of $64 million over that time. We've got a little more detailed information on the amount Alvin ISD's retained over that period of time as well. So the original TIRZ plan established a budget in 1999. $248 million of projects included that could be reimbursed by the TIRZ. That included $108 million of infrastructure, some administrative cost, and then city facilities of $5 million, and then educational facilities of a little over $134 million. The way that the financing works is the developer fronts the money. There's a letter of financing agreement that's required for reimbursement of the expenditure. All the expenditures are accounted for, they're audited, and once approved, then the developer or city or whoever's doing the project is able to get paid back from the TIRZ, either with the TIRZ selling bonds or the TIRZ using the cash it generates annually. So the primary developer, of course, was Shadow Creek Ranch. They're now projected to be paid off all of the infrastructure they built by 2019. The City of Pearland does have one letter of financing agreement for the Broadway improvements. It was the extension of Broadway, basically from Kirby West over to FM 521. And that's a little under $8.5 million that we're now expecting the city will get reimbursed for in fiscal year 21-22. And then there's several remaining developer LFAs that are all expected to be paid off by 2024. The Alvin ISD TIRZ benefit, basically what was included originally was to build 3 Alvin ISD schools. The benefit to Alvin ISD participating was that the way they participated kept their state funding intact, as well as provided a funding mechanism to build school facilities within the TIRZ. It functioned a little bit differently than the developer or the way the city has, in that instead of the letter of financing agreements, they basically retained 75% of the TIRZ revenues for the construction of school facilities within the zone. So if the chart we saw earlier where the contribution from Alvin ISD, a little over $50 million to the TIRZ, based on the retained portion of that, for school facilities, it's estimated that they've retained over in excess of $100 million to build school facilities in the zone. So it's been a great benefit to them as well. The TIRZ plan did include some public and municipal facilities that have not been started at this point. It included a library for $2.5 million, a fire station, $2.5 million. And these are all in $1999. And then in the infrastructure portion of it, there was over $7.5 million included for park improvements. So where does that sit today? Basically, for the library and the fire station, the land was purchased by the developer. They've been reimbursed for those costs. So that leaves a remaining amount for the library of about $2.2 million and a little under $2 million for the fire station in $1999. When you use the pricing index that was included for the TIRZ, we've got a little less than $4 million for the library in today's dollars, $3.5 million for the fire station. And then the parks being in the infrastructure portion of that, there's about $3.4 million remaining there that can be applied to parks, which in today's dollars is about 6.2. So altogether, there's about $13.75 million in 2018 dollars to go towards these public projects that were originally included in the TIRZ. So how does that compare to the actual project costs that we're looking at today and what we've contemplated for future financing by the city? We would first have to do a new letter of financing agreement to have these reimbursed. These all were included in the original TIRZ, but you can see there the cost today we're looking at for the scope of the library, we're looking at about $18.25 million. Fire Station 8, about $10.3 million. And then Shadow Creek Ranch Trail, 2.3, and then Shadow Creek Ranch Park Phase 2, about $9.27 million. So total project costs there, over $45.5 million. What's currently in the TIRZ budget we just saw on the last slide is that $13.7 million. So to be able to fund all these projects with the TIRZ, we'd have to go back and amend the TIRZ budget and add about $26.8 million into that. So some of the TIRZ and looking at the additional capacity of the TIRZ. So we saw that about 2024, all the developers, all the existing LFAs, including the cities for Broadway, will be paid off. So the TIRZ doesn't end until 2029. So funds between that point and 2029 would be available for any additional projects or any additional cost for the projects that are already included in the TIRZ, such as Shadow Creek Ranch and the library and the fire station. So running some models on how much that'll be and when we could potentially be paid off, we had to use some assumptions, starting with the January 1, 2018 preliminary value for the area, assessed value. It assumed that future residential growth would be based off what the major builders and the TIRZ are projecting right now. It assumed no reappraisal growth, but it also assumed no future decreases in assessed value for the zone. It does not include commercial growth, and the 2018 taxes are assumed for the remaining years. It also assumes that there's no extension of the TIRZ beyond 2029, so the TIRZ still would expire in 2029. So with all those assumptions, the current projections indicate that the TIRZ will produce plenty of funds, plenty of revenue to pay for the entirety of all those projects, the library, fire station, and the park improvements. However, it does require going through a TIRZ budget amendment. So that process is basically at your direction. We'll have the consulting team we've worked with on the TIRZ develop a plan amendment for consideration by the TIRZ Board of Directors initially. Prior to board consideration, we will have to notify the other participants in the TIRZ. So both counties as well as Alvin ISD will have to be notified that we're doing this budget amendment. We've had some preliminary discussions, just letting those folks know what we're looking at. Alvin ISD, has indicated that they see the benefit of these public projects, and we'll of course have more discussions with the counties as we move forward. But it is just a notification to those folks. And then if the TIRZ board approves the draft plan amendment, then it gets recommended to the city council for adoption. It also includes a public hearing that we'd have to go through. And then if the council adopts that, the new budget takes effect. So if we go through that process to reimburse those projects, when could we expect to be repaid? Well, all the existing LFAs are expected to be reimbursed by 2024, and then any additional ones that get added, whether they're ours or other developer expenditures, would be in priority order of when they're submitted. So our projections right now for reimbursement on the library, the fire station, and the park projects would be after 2024, but before the end of the TIRZ. So what we could do is start these projects earlier than that, do some short-term financing so that we could get those projects delivered, and avoid any additional inflation cost by delaying those projects, just as we've seen the developers do, and then look at and then get the reimbursement shortly thereafter. So our recommendations tonight on the TIRZ are to move forward with amending that budget, move forward with the library, the park, the fire station, and the parks projects, remove those projects from the consideration with the GO bonds for the 2019 bond program, since we already have this funding mechanism in place that already included these projects, and then proceed with funding those with short-term financing, which then we would in turn pay off with the TIRZ reimbursements. So that covers the TIRZ. We wanted to kind of pause right here and see if there's any questions about the TIRZ funding mechanism and as far as and the recommendations going forward, because funding these projects through the TIRZ as they were originally included in the TIRZ has a huge impact on the 2019 bond program. If we were to do the fire station, library, and park projects, or some combination of those in the 29 bond program, it of course significantly shortens the list of projects we could potentially fund with that bond program. So,
Mr. Mayor, before we turn over to council, just to take a step back, I want to make sure everybody in the audience and council realize that this is all a very positive thing for the city. This is at least gives you the option of using this stream of financing for some projects. These were all, as Trent mentioned, already in the TIRZ consideration. It's a question of whether we're comfortable building up the budgets for those to match reality of what we have in the CIP. And it's all credit to the TIRZ being so successful and making the most of it in this last 10 years that it's in existence. They'll still go away. The same time frame had been envisioned, but it's a question of whether the city wants to submit for that, its financing its projects to the degree that's actually going to cost the city. So appreciate any comments or questions or thoughts as we look at this.
I think it's a good plan. And I think it's going to put in place a number of the facilities we need, library, fire station, some of the other parks facilities that if we take the library, fire station, and parks off of the list and fund them separately, is that your plan?
Yes, sir. That'd be the thought, is that when we get into the CIP list.
Would that be COs?
Well, you're talking about how we finance them, these projects?
It's sort of an idea.
You know, we haven't gotten that deep. I mean, there could be COs certainly, but probably we'd want to do those shorter term. And but we could also look at least partial, if not all, self-financing that with some interfund transfers and to and from notes with cash that we have, so we can pay ourselves back.
Yeah. If we get enough money, we could close out and pay it off earlier, perhaps.
That's the idea.
Okay, that's a good plan. I like it.
So if we go ahead and fund these projects up front and then get reimbursed by the TIRZ on this, what's the interest rate that we're going to have to incur on this, and will the TIRZ be paying for that too?
The second part of that's a good question. I couldn't answer. We would, I would, you know, it depends on how we do it. Like if we were doing a to from ourselves, one school of thought would be we borrow from the water sewer fund that has large amounts of required cash, but you know, my experience that you could borrow from that, you know, just as long as you paper it up and make sure that it's going to get paid back, and you could set your own reasonable rate for that. I'd like to at least look at that first for a good portion of that. If we did have to go into the private markets, you know, we'd have to explore that with, you know, financial institutions. I don't know. We wouldn't want to go through, I don't think, a lot of the usual bond counsel and all that kind of work to short-term finance it.
Mm-hmm. And turn on. So, and we're pretty confident that we'll get that 40 million in, or was it 40 million or up to 64 million back from the TIRZ to be able to pay all this back and not end up in a budget crunch where we don't get everything we need back, including any interest.
Yeah, we'll flesh this out more for you as we go, but the estimates are based upon the values that are in the ground now and pretty reasonable, safe growth assumptions from there. I don't even know, Trent or Johnny, you know, if we built any future commercial growth. I mean, there's some other things in there that's pretty conservative. So I I bet your house, not my house on this, but it's pretty solid.
Yes, it was a very, very conservative estimate, not including any growth in commercial, and looking at no valuation increase for the TIRZ itself, but no decrease as well. I mean, I think, track record is we will see value increases. So it's a conservative estimate, and it does provide, plenty of additional incremental funds over through the life of the TIRZ through 2029 that would pay for these projects. I think when if we move forward with this, when we come back and we start looking at the TIRZ budget and the amendments to that, we would be able to get much more detailed into what the finances look like for the TIRZ.
Wait, did you say earlier that some money would be taken out of the water, wastewater?
That would just be a means of financing. There's substantial amounts of cash that's required to be there to meet our bond covenants. But, that can also be in forms of an investment and a loan to interfund transfer. So that's the idea. It's nothing, it's done. You just need to document that. And, that'd be one way to do it. I'm not saying that's the only way or that the way, but that's an option.
Okay, I didn't know we could take funds out of enterprise fund.
It'd be a loan. It'd just be an investment for the water and sewer fund. It'd be borrowing money to the city of Pearland general fund capital projects at a set term, set interest, just like if you went and borrowed it from the bank.
Okay. The dollar amount you got here, 40,586,923. Are those good numbers? I guess Trent, on those, does that cover everything? Or is that the estimated construction cost, or does it include the geotech, the design?
It's all inclusive to deliver the project.
Everything in there?
Yes, sir. Design, survey, geotech, construction management, material testing, contingency, construction, land. There's no land acquisition, so we're good there.
Are you still looking at putting the 20% contingency in here? I know on some of the others that on the bond program, I see a contingency of 20%. That seems like it's awful.
Sure, it varies depending on the point we're at in the project. If we're early in the project, we haven't done any schematic or any site planning or site work. Of course, we're going to be closer to 20, 25%. As we move through, the early preliminary work on the projects and preliminary engineering, we'll bring those down to 15 to 20%.
Well, I noticed in your schedule here of if it's really approved here tonight on this and the other ones that you're looking at May and June to start the PER on these projects, will that give us a good update there? I think, personally, I think 20% contingency is pretty high. I mean, if we do a PER, we should be able to bring that down.
So we are looking to do preliminary engineering. Some of our lessons learned from 2007, we did full-blown 30% preliminary engineering reports on all the bond program projects. And as we moved through the program, there were certain things that if there was a gap between 2006 and the start of the project that we had to go back and redo. The biggest one, probably surveying. Things just moved too fast and changed too quickly for us here. So what we're looking to do this go around, instead of out doing detailed on-the-ground survey for the preliminary stuff, would be to use LiDAR as well as some drone LiDAR surveying, so that it'll give us a good basis of what's out there. We've used it on some other projects very effectively, and it's very cost-effective compared to on-the-ground survey. And so, whereas we don't plan on taking these quite as far as we took the 2007 bond programs, we're taking them far enough that we can get good, much better, tighter cost estimates, and then we can look at contingencies at that point.
Okay. Good.
Thank you. One, I just say I want to commend staff for being creative here I think it does allow us some more flexibility if we choose to use it. I think the creativity of borrowing from ourselves at an interest rate with available funds is also best use of cash that we have on hand, so we don't have to go out and pay someone else to use it. We're a little early for these discussions, but I would say if we can avoid the certificate of occupancies through anything creative that we have, any tool, a legal tool we have that's a creative way to fund these, I think we should. That being said, obviously, I'm in favor of us trying to utilize the TIRZ dollars to move these projects forward. Trent, if I'm understanding correct, so we're expecting to pay the developer off by 2024, and the remaining TIRZ increments that go to the city from that pay, or from that point in time to 2029 when it expires, we'll be able to utilize almost the full amount of the increment reimbursement towards these projects, correct? Or are there other projects that are not developer funded that would still be reimbursed between that 5-year time period?
That are not developer funded?
Yes, sir.
Right now, the projections we've seen, based on the financial model for the TIRZ, is that the TIRZ will probably create additional incremental value beyond the 40 million or so that we need. Actually, it's the 40 million less the 13 that's already in there. But it's the full 40 that it's got to create to pay for these projects. Is that it'll probably create significantly more than that. I think we were trying to stick to projects that were originally included in the TIRZ as part of the TIRZ and the TIRZ budget. But there may be some additional funds near the end of the TIRZ in addition to this. When the TIRZ ends, I believe, and I'll have Cynthia confirmed, when the TIRZ ends, if there are excess funds in the TIRZ, then those go back to the entity that generated those. So we'd get our share back, AISD would get their share back, as well as the counties. So it makes sense to fund these projects through this mechanism. But if there are excess funds beyond these projects at the end of the TIRZ that are not spent on TIRZ projects, then they would go back to those respective entities that created that.
So the first question is, in 2024, do we think we'll be fully reimbursed for our portion of Broadway that we extended to 521, or will we still be paying ourselves on that?
Right now, we expect that we'll be fully reimbursed for Broadway in fiscal year 21-22.
Okay.
So it's already has a letter of financing agreement in with the TIRZ. We're already in line. We're in front of some of the other development projects because we did that several years ago. I think we did that in about 2009. So we're in line, and that's the schedule for that. There are some remaining developer letter of financing agreements for their developments that right now are projected to not be paid off till about 2024.
So essentially, we're looking at, if I can oversimplify it, we agree to this now. We agree to the amending the financial component of the TIRZ. We can pull the money out now, or count on the money being pulled out and reimbursed now. Go ahead and move forward with these projects now, or we can wait till 2029. The money will have already been pulled, but it goes to the TIRZ. It gets reimbursed back to us, split with the other taxing entities, and we can do these projects. We're just having to wait 10 or 11 years to do it.
Well, and we would not see the benefit of the other participants in the TIRZ reimbursing those projects as well.
I think when it's characterized like that, it just doesn't seem like there's much sense in saying no to it, at least from my perspective. If we were, I know we're already moving forward with the design on Fire Station 8.
Yes, sir.
So we'll have more, probably by the summer, whenever they're done with the schematic design, we'll have some good understanding of what that cost is. With respect to the library and Shadow Creek Park Phase 2, we haven't gotten any design started. The budgetary numbers were coming back on the 20 to 30%, or just blank numbers right now to kind of, we think is generally going to cover those costs based on the current market, correct?
Yes, sir. The the fire station's based on our most recent fire station bids, Fire Station 1, plus a little bit of inflation. And then we looked at, that cost plus, other general construction costs for facilities, and used a rule of thumb based on that, cost per square foot for the library, based on the current projected square footage of that facility. And then the park, is based on the current plans for the next phases of the park and recent costs for trail projects. But the library and the park projects do need to be vetted out further to really nail down the cost estimates on those.
Well, I've certainly made not made it unclear that I'd like the library done sooner rather than later. So if we were able to, if we went through the process and approved this amendment to the TIRZ, could we in theory initiate all 4 of these projects? Obviously, the fire station's already under design, but initiate the design of the other projects immediately after we made that agreement and get all of these going and have them in construction within the next 1 or 2 years?
Yes, sir.
And is that the plan? Is that what?
That's what we're recommending, is to move these projects forward. And as Clay walked through, is utilize available funds, borrow from ourselves, or some combination of that to finance those until the TIRZ funds reimburse us.
I don't know, maybe it's just me, but I don't see a negative here. So I'm fully in support of it.
Mayor, if I could amplify one point that Member Perez and Trent Epperson brought up is, to me, to oversimplify a little bit, and obviously we're recommending this, but getting the city's projects in line is very important. At least that preserves the option to set up the budget, modify the budget, and establish our position. Worst case, if you went out there, as Trent Epperson said, there's no guarantees that the city would get reimbursed anything. In fact, I think other developers would come in with other projects. We saw that happen, and they'd get in ahead of us. So I think there's strong interest on the part of other TIRZ participants that public projects get built, and these were identified already. It's not like these got invented. It's just bringing the budgets up to current and snuff, and bringing that back for the people that live there.
With there being additional funds potentially, we don't know exactly. Would we be looking at get these projects in line, have them designed and in construction in maybe 2 or 3 years' time, when we have firmer numbers with respect to what it cost us to build this, how much is left in value? Would we be looking at possibly another amendment to try and expand the scope of what it can cover if we have other public projects in that area that we want to do? Are we looking, is the current plan or the current idea, let's get these done. We don't want to expand the projects. We don't want to entertain the idea of expanding the projects, and whatever's left at the end is left at the end to be reimbursed to the entities. Or have we even thought that far?
I think that right now we're looking at the projects that are in the CIP now that are in the existing TIRZ projects, and building those out the way they should be done with this financing mechanism. That would certainly be in the options. If things went really well with the TIRZ financing, you could look at that. I think that's one of the advantages of getting ourselves in line and starting the engineering, as you said, and firming up the cost estimates. That each year we go on, the numbers become more firm in terms of the value, what's there. So it's not like we could decide that we want to do, for instance, the library and the fire station as critical projects, and see how, if the values didn't come in or we had a terrible year or something like that, could slow down, but at least we'd establish our position for future reimbursement. So it's not like there aren't some options and some relief valves if we went into this.
Okay. And one last thing, with respect to the contingency, I think at this phase, without there being a design, 20 and 30% is just standard contingency. I agree with you, Mr. Epperson, is that I would, in retrospect, I think it was a mistake for us to get that far out ahead of our skis on some of the projects that we did in the 07 bond. I'd rather look at, possibly overestimating paper money than actually spending real money to get way out ahead of projects that we're not prepared to get done and wasting that money because the scope and the timing changes. So, again, I don't, quite possible I'm missing something, but I have yet to see a negative with this approach.
I, from time to time, probably tend to simplify things a little bit, but if I'm understanding this correct, basically the TIRZ funds, there's a good chance somebody's going to get this money. The chance of the TIRZ board saying, nope, we're done when we get rid of this and we're not going to collect any more money is probably slim to none. So as I've told people all the time when they talk about federal grant money and other stuff, I really wish that, as a kid, I wish my dad would have saved the $20, but if he was handing it out, I wanted it instead of my sister. So I would rather the city get in and get some of these projects in. This is one way that I can fully support the library out there. I think I've been fairly vocal from the beginning that I think what we're doing out there for a library works well and is financially sound. But if the residents in that area truly want a standalone library and see value in that, this is one way that I'm fine with it because of value to create that library is coming from that area. So, the library, the fire station, I'm all on board. The parks I can go with. It's just, we'll see what the TIRZ board comes back with. And my two priorities out of this list would be the library and the fire station, because I think those are two that directly benefit that area the most as far as dollar in and dollar staying in that part of the community. And when we get to the bond projects, I'll voice my opinion on moving forward on those. But I do like the idea that this, and I want to stress, I support as soon as we get approval and have the financing tied down that we break ground and we start these projects. The last thing I want to see is somebody sitting up here 10 years from now going, why don't we have this built? I think that's one of the bigger mistakes that as a body we've made in the past, and I've heard the arguments and I know why. I just don't want to see that repeated. And this is a good way to make sure that doesn't happen, I think.
Mm-hmm. When you're spending tax dollars or anticipated tax dollars for projects, the West Side Library is the second most used in Missouri County. And it's hard for anybody to complain about the fact that we're building a library to take the place of this rented service. I'm not sure what our rent is there, but if we quit paying that rent, that's going to make almost a couple of payments on our the construction of the library. So I think it's always good when you have something positive like that. And I've heard a lot of people say they'd love to have their own a library out there, more than just a rented space. So it's good. You coming? Sorry about it. You want Tony?
No.
Oh, I'm sorry. Derek.
Thank you, Mayor. It sounds like everything's been said. I actually showed up just so I could hear Councilmember Ward know for one last time, because this is last time that I'm going to be able to start with him. No, I think this is it. No, the next one is swearing in.
Swearing in.
But at any rate, it's already been stated. I definitely hope that the library is at the top of the list for things to be done. Fire station's already under design and whatnot, and so it's already in the plans. As long as it's not going to hit us, at least from what I'm reading and from what I read, it's not going to hit us. Going through the TIRZ is not going to affect our debt ratio. I'm totally fine with it. I'm sure Councilmember Carbone can tell me some things that I'm missing numbers wise, so I'll wait for that. But other than that, I mean, it looks good.
We haven't heard from him yet.
Yeah, we haven't heard from him yet, but looks good, and I also agree with Councilman Perez. I don't see any reason why we shouldn't go about it this route.
Yeah, if it gives us a chance to get these on the books and be able to get money back from the TIRZ on it, then I think it's a good idea. I agree with Councilman Reed, as long as it's not going to affect our debt rate. But yeah, I do want to get these projects done. I don't want to be, 3 or 4 council turnovers trying to get these projects done. We need to get them on the books, get them done, get construction and design done, just get these projects moving. I did have one other question. You said that there could be I don't know, an overage in the TIRZ money, and we don't use that on any projects. Can that money come back into our general fund, or how does that work?
So when the TIRZ ends in 2029, if there's any remaining funds in the TIRZ, it will be returned to the taxing jurisdiction that generated those. So we will get our proportionate share back of that, as well as Alvin ISD will get theirs, and each county will get their piece of that. So, that we will see that at the end with anything that's not spent that's generated by the TIRZ in 2029.
And at that point, we can, what can we do with that money? I mean, what can we spend that money on?
It'll be, I guess, kind of like a one-time income as opposed to, I'm missing the word, repeatable income, recurring revenues. There we go. One-time revenues. So, usually when we see one-time revenues, we look at, one-time expenditures that don't have ongoing O&M cost. I think it would come back to the general fund, and it would be up to the needs and desires of the community and the council at that point as far as where those funds went.
Okay, thank you.
I bet there's some other projects out there that need to be fixed. Councilman Carbone?
Thank you, Mayor. When I first got on the Development Authority of Pearland, we were looking at projections saying that Shadow Creek Ranch developer would never be paid off, much less us at the $9 million for Broadway, much less the LFAs behind that. So I mean, it's all good news. These projects are in our CIP, 5-year CIP. So as a body, we've agreed to these projects. In my opinion, we've got the opportunity, whether we get fully reimbursed or not, the only chance of getting reimbursed is getting them inside the TIRZ. That means that we'll essentially be recouping some of our capital costs from the other participants in the TIRZ. So I like the idea. I think it makes sense. As we move forward, I'd like to get some more details in terms of the interest rate that will be reimbursed. I know the developers get reimbursed certain rates. I'd like to see what that is. I'd like to get some more information on how we plan to fund this in the short term. Whether we go to the enterprise fund and kind of do an intercompany borrowing. That doesn't get me too excited, but we can debate that later. And I guess also, just to clarify, in terms of tax rate, adding projects to the TIRZ is not going to change any tax rates, either in the city or in the city that's outside the TIRZ or in the TIRZ. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And if we didn't do this, then theoretically our debt service would be greater if we move forward with these projects. And therefore, if we don't do this, it would be potentially higher tax rates, correct?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
If we were to move forward with these projects, with general obligation bonds, that would impact our debt service rate.
Okay. And then also, I don't know on any of these projects if we have any HGAC or TIP funds or any other grants like that, but how would that play in, or is that not applicable?
As far as fire stations, library, and park options, there are small parks grants out there we see available to us occasionally. But as far as library and fire stations, I'm not aware of any options there. Typically through HGAC, we're looking at, as far as big dollars, we're looking at road projects.
Is there any way to wrap in any equipment for Fire Station 8? Or is that just building?
We can ask our TIRZ consultant and see, whether or not that's something that qualifies under the terms of the TIRZ.
Yeah, I'd at least like to ask the question. That's all I had, Mayor.
Okay.
So Mayor, I think next topic we're ready for is a recap of our CIP. Is that right, Trent?
I'm going to turn it over to Robert right now, but appreciate the input on the TIRZ. It really is a great thing that has occurred out there with the growth and the valuation growth to be able to finance these projects. So
Got one question for you.
the next part of the presentation, we did pull those out. So we're going to focus on all the other projects that are in the bond program.
Robert, before you start, I think there's one more question.
Yeah, just one question on it. 2029, when it's paid off, what have you, and you send the money coming back into different areas. Does the dollars that come back in, do they have to be, can they only be used in the TIRZ area, or can they, those dollars?
That's going to be a whole nother discussion and very complex. I've always been told that's actually going to be a negative for the city operating fund because right now we get the administrative fee, the 60-some%. So it's based comparative to our operating rate, which has always been a problem. But it's not, frankly, worth trying to figure out too much and calculate right now just because it's going to be so different in 10 years than it is now. But it'll be just general, it'll be a trade-off instead of the administrative fee, the city will get its operating rate on the entirety. So that's how I understand it.
Yeah, I just wondered because, in the mud districts, if we go and take in an area of mud district and there's money left in it.
Oh, you mean the leftover money? I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about, yeah, the leftover money, that's a good question too. I presume it's got to be in the area, but.
I don't know if it's got to be spent in the area or not. I would assume it comes back in the general fund, but there may be some restrictions on that. But the TIRZ ends, so I'm not sure that there are.
Let's cross that bridge when we get there.
But realistically, if we don't get in line, or once we do get in line, there'll be other developer projects that come in line. So the question is, do we get fully paid, and does the person behind us get fully paid? At some point, there's not going to be funds to fully pay off everybody that's gotten in line. And I think that's highly likely over the TIRZ dissolving and distributing funds.
Exactly.
I think that's possible, but most of the infrastructure from developers out there has been done. So I think our consultants that put the financial model together have indicated that even if additional developer projects come in, that there will be funds for those as well.
So should we try to make our ask bigger? I mean, if we're getting in line, do we want to push everything in line?
I would suggest that we look at those three, but there's nothing that says we can't come back with the subsequent ones. We need to sort through and probably get ourselves established for this, but I agree. There's nothing that says we can't put in for additional
Right.
park and trails, et cetera, et cetera. Why not?
Shadow Creek Ranch Park Phase 3 and 4?
Yep.
I mean, we're going to get in line, let's get in line.
I don't disagree with that. I think we take it a step at a time, get these on board, get these going, and then get better financial information as far as what money's still available and what's in the CIP, 5-year CIP for that area. But I think there's too many variables right now for us to even start thinking about what we want to add to it, in my opinion.
That was a good point that you brought out because on some of the Shadow Creek in the park, we're going to look at additional real estate to
Connection.
build them out, and we get that property off this.
It's not even right now, those aren't even in the 5-year CIP. I mean, we're getting out ahead of our skis talking about expanding the projects we haven't even identified. I think if and when we have that discussion, we get these done, then we look at CIP projects that are in an area that qualify, that are already identified and aren't funded, and then we look at if there's still reimbursement left, what other projects that are not identified in the 5-year CIP at that time, do we want to add to it, and how much money is aggressive? I think, or can we go after aggressively? I think it's just, if we get into the weeds on that stuff, we could just spin our wheels for a while and just deal with it one at a time, in my opinion.
I mean, I think when we get closer to the end, you can always look at park improvements along the detention in that area. We're going to have some nice detention in and around that area. I think you can do, and land acquisition for more parks. Haven't heard a community yet that says they want less green space. So this would be one way I could support the government going in and acquiring some land for some parks if there's going to be TIRZ funds left out there, and that's kind of low hanging fruit, I think, for us to look at towards the end. It can be done rather quick and easily, but it all, I think a lot of it will hinge off of what we're about to talk about on, how much can we really do in this time frame as a city with the bond projects that we're about to talk about.
So we'll turn over to Mr. Upton, and he'll take us to the next phase here.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. To head forward, we're going to talk a little bit about the projects that we have selected and go over them quickly, a little bit of a scope, a picture, and just a quick justification, but we'll go through these quite quickly so that we can stay on track and then also have any further discussions along the way. But this is what the projects that staff has worked together with various departments that are affected to develop, and moving forward with those type of proposed projects. This is a summary, as we always have in our capital project manual, just kind of breaks down each of the areas from drainage to wastewater and showing the amounts per year for the next 5 years. This is just that 5-year look ahead. In this one in particular, the numbers that you'll see here is that as we've rolled out, as Mr. Epperson has stated, we've taken out the projects associated with the TIRZ. So in here is only roughly about $34 million worth of that original discussion back last year of around $70 million type proposal for a bond package. As I just mentioned, what it does not include is anything associated with the TIRZ projects, that fire station, the library, et cetera. It also does not include anything with our master drainage plan that we're in the process of designing and taking a look through with our consultant and finding those areas regionally, as we have been with Brazoria Drainage District number 4. But what it does do is it takes a look at those items that we found during Harvey, those localized areas that we've now discovered, and you have seen in our Harvey drainage assessment report that's been prepared by staff. And those are what's coming up, is those localized projects. Also taking a look too, is we've also identified in here, we'll mention is that in June of this year, HGAC will be opening their tip call. We've been doing some preliminary engineering reports on 6 proposed projects. Those are in this proposal that you'll see and we'll talk about shortly. Of course, as with any tip project, if they're selected, final numbers will be determined based on the matching funds as required. Also in here, we do not talk about anything or have anything associated with FM 518 because that is TxDOT going to be working on that. We're continuing to meet with TxDOT on a regular basis about 518 and several of our other projects that we have. But our current contribution as they're scoping this project is not defined at this time. But we would recommend, as you take a look at this and as we bring this project forth with whatever our contribution is determined to be in association with TxDOT, is to take a look at COs. But that's just a recommendation at this time. So heading forward, we'll break this up into our 6 main areas, and we'll start with drainage. And this is just an overall drainage map, identifying locations in each of those areas. And so we'll head from there. And these are localized areas, as I said earlier, that we discovered during Harvey. Piper Road is one. We talked a little bit about it last year. And this will be looking at regrading and refocusing the drainage in that area to drain to the south and utilize the drainage channels to get it closer to Mary's Creek faster. This area is known to flood on a regular basis, and so we want to try and address that. We'll take a look at Mimosa Acres. This is another one. We've done some survey in this area. We've come up with a plan with our consultant. Next steps will be moving forward to construction. Again, this is regrading of ditches, getting them to flow correctly, resetting culverts, And we found that and also then justified also with our assessment during and our after action with Harvey. Same with Willowcrest, just to the north of Mimosa Acres. Take this this project and is taking a look at the drainage as well, but does have concrete roads with underground storm drains, and these are also undersized based on some of taking our look, and we want to get in there and resize those. This area is a low-lying area and also known to flood on a regular basis as the storm intensities increase. Also taking a look is the Wesley area. We've had a lot of discussions as we've been doing our public meeting with the master drainage plan. Several residents from this area have come forth and experienced some flooding in this area. Again, this is some areas that the city and our drainage staff with the streets and drainage group and public works has gone after and been trying to do some regrading, but we're at a point where we need to really take a look at it and reslope and look at driveways, culverts, etc., and regrade those correctly. Hickory Slough Detention Pond. This is a continuation of a project that started several years ago. Sorry. As I said, I was going to try and go through quickly. But with this one, this is the continued expansion. This is the mirror side of the ultimate plan for this. So detention that will come off of Hickory Slough for storage, and then we'll see later in the parks project will be then to take a look at continued expansion of the park facilities that are used. Facilities maps. This is our facility program. We'll take a look there at several facilities that we want to take a look at that have come through from the fire department and also PD. First one being our animal services shelter. As council did through several months ago, you had the opportunity to come through and walk through that facility. It is an older facility that is in need of attention, and it is a very busy facility, so we are having some capacity issues and are needing of some upgrades. So this will be looking at a 7,000 square foot facility meeting current standards. And so we'll be looking for a place for this, a location. Fire department is requesting taking a look at their burn building to provide a true burn building there, 1-story or 2-story. It's been proposed and looked at, and then in that same area, but also to augment current facilities. And also phase 2, which would be the final build out of that program for the training facility, would be the concrete road and structures, and also the bay areas associated so that you can do individual training areas such as you take a look at car extractions or car fires, etc. That would be then set in a specific bay. And this would then go along with their master plan study that's been done. Parks facilities, and you'll see that they'll be spread out through some of our areas. First one is a continuation of our Independence Park. As you all know, currently phase 1 is under construction right now, moving forward, along with the Drainage District doing improvements for their area as well along Mary's Creek. And so this is exciting. This will be continuation. It'll include, additional playground equipment, boating facilities, as they want to take a look up there in the north part of the park and utilize that detention basin to its capacity for amenities there. Also taking a look at a water splash pad in there as well. So some good improvements. The nature trails over at JHAG, this will be a continuation of what's there, but this will then provide the trails and the facilities then to connect those islands that are out there so you can have a true facility and take a look through on walking. Included paddlecraft launch areas that they're looking at, and this is all part of their Parks master plan. A trail connectivity, and this will continue from the Green Tree Trail Service project that we're doing right now. We have a current project that is also partially funded with HGAC. This one here would continue from the end of that trail and then get us over to Independence Park. Additionally, the park replacement equipment. This is a program through a lot of our park projects that park equipment needs to be replaced. Currently, our general fund operational budget allocations do not account or do not provide adequate funding to be able to recapitalize this park equipment. So this would be a program then to go through these parks and get them updated and get new equipment in there to then recapitalize for their 20-year life and continued maintenance thereon. The Hickory Slough Sports Park, as I said, this is a continuation of the drainage project. If we need to have the drainage out there to have the capacity, and then the roll right in would be right to creating the soccer fields, sports fields, lighting, extended parking. This is a continuation of the Parks Master Plan as well. Parkland acquisition. This is to have funds set aside to go after an area of land that will then provide additional parks in an area to be defined. And we just kind of keep this kind of quiet just so that we can get appropriate pricing for land as we take a look. Of course, it's all in association with our Parks Master Plan as set aside. Streets map and streets associated with both TIP funding potentially and then continued maintenance. Our street reconstruction program. This is a program that's through our pavement condition assessment. And as we take a look at streets, this is a portion to recapitalize. As we said, our current budgets that we have set aside do not provide the additional funding or the adequacy of funding necessary to keep our index, our pavement condition assessment index at the level that it's at. And per that plan, as we met with our consultant who's provided an evaluation of our pavements and taking a look, is that we need about $4 million a year to do maintenance such as crack sealing, panel replacements, etc., with mill and fills in certain areas. All that's needed to keep our rating index of our street index average where it's at. This is our Pearland Parkway traffic improvements. Many of you will take a look at this and say, is this a super street concept? As we've had many discussions with you, we've changed that philosophy and move forward is that this would be looking at a traffic signal light located at the Forest Park Lane intersection, and then also taking a look at fiber to continue to keep our traffic signals integrated with our traffic management center. This is the traffic circle improvements at Pearland Parkway. This would be to construct a true roundabout in the center and then provide fly-offs in each direction so that the unimpeded traffic going northbound on Pearland Parkway towards Beltway 8 will continue on, but if you want to head down McCard, you will go into the traffic circle and set that up where the traffic circle, when you're inside, you have the right-of-way. Those coming in will yield to those inside the circle. Bailey Road expansion. This is one we're taking a look at in the upcoming TIP call. This will continuation of what we've just done for Bailey Road in terms of 4 lanes, and then tie 4 lanes across from Veterans back over to Highway 35, expand the bridge to 4 lanes, and provide that 4-lane connection. Also ties to, like I said, our completed project, but then the county is also under their process of creating the 4 lanes from 1128 west. Again, this is a potential TIP-funded project where we've done some preliminary engineering work. Max Road, this is a continuation of our current HGAC-funded project that will go from Hughes Ranch Road north up to McCard Road. We've also a potential funding for our TIP call in June. Hughes Ranch Road, this is a continuation to take from Hughes Ranch Road at Cullen to go east and create a 4-lane road to tie into the 4-lane road at the Hickory Slough Sports Complex, and then have 4-lane connectivity from Max Road that's being built all the way over to Smith Ranch Road, the Toll Road, and 288. So it's a project there. Archie Road, this will be a 4-lane expansion per our traffic thoroughfare plan coming from 518 all the way down to Bailey. We've been looking at this one also to do through the TIP program as well. We've done some preliminary engineering reports and cost estimating so that we can be prepared for that call in June. That ends it on the street projects, but I wanted to talk a little bit about different bond types. We've talked a lot about and mentioned tonight about general obligation bonds. Those general obligation bonds are ones that are voted, as we're talking about tonight, taking a look at a 2019 bond package. So those would be all bonds that would be elected by citizens. There's the certificate of obligation bonds. Those are ones that you've also mentioned too. Those are ones that we can do. Just requires public notice. Still, both of those are secured by property taxes. And then there's also the water sewer revenue bonds. And those are secured, as stated up there, through revenues generated by our water and sewer program. And as City Manager Pearson stated, it's with our covenants that we have a certain amount of cash on hand that we have to have and keep. And so that's how that's generated.
That completes your report?
No, sir. I have a couple more. This is a big selection, a big process. So we broke this down and took a look, and we covered a lot of projects that we covered on this. These projects we broke down in the first 15, total about a $76 million type bond package. If you took those projects, we worked with the departments, ranked them, and just took a look at what would be important. So here's the first list of, if you take a look at $76 million for a bond package in 2019. With that, if we took a look at a $90 million package, these would be the two additional projects that would go together. And as you mentioned, they're both Hickory Slough, both the detention pond and the park facility sportsplex. Those need to tie together because they're in the same facility, so we lump those together. And then finally, taking a look at a $120 million package, you would add in the Hughes Ranch Road, the Harkey expansion, fire training phase 2 facility, and then parkland acquisition. That would get you up to the 3 different type of bond packages that we wanted to talk to you tonight. But also, continuing on, is that there are several other projects that we didn't go through and present on, that's listed here, that we kept and fell below that $120 million mark. And there's a variety of items there, another 7 projects as well. And so with that, I'd like to turn that back over to Mr. Epperson here if there's any questions. But if you have any questions on projects, I believe it's time to open that up if City Manager.
Okay.
If we can maybe get into the impacts of the different packages, and then we can go back through the list of projects. Did you have anything else, Mr.?
No.
So we're going to cover, based on that, thank you, Robert, basically the impacts on our debt service for this package. Wanted to start with some historical information on our general obligation debt. So our debt to assessed value over the past 10 years has, kind of dropped and back up a little bit, and then slowly started to drop again. So seen a peak of about 5% net general obligation debt to our assessed value, and we're down close to 3.5% at this point. And then our general obligation debt per capita historically. So we've hovered a little bit above and around $3,000 per capita. And currently, we're down in the about $2,864 range as of 2017. So wanted to share those because those are some of the big things that go into our bond ratings. And so wanted to give you our bond ratings from the different agencies. AA2 from Moody's, and just some quick comments out of the ratings: high quality, subject to very low credit risk. S&P, very strong capacity to meet its financial commitments. And from Fitch, very high quality credit, not significantly vulnerable to foreseeable events. So we do have a very good bond rating based on our current debt and financial situation. Wanted to talk a little bit about the debt impacts on the 2019 bond package, and kind of go back a couple of years when we first started looking at the 2019 bond package. We did some estimates. And in 2016, what the council asked us to look at is, when could you start a bond program of about $70 million, complete the program over about 5 years, and do it without a debt tax rate increase. And so the projections at that time were around May 2019, or when our assessed value reaches about $8.3 billion. At the time, we also looked at our debt service peak with that $70 million package would be around 53 cents. So fast forward a couple of years where we've done some debt refinancing, interest rates have been very low. We look at where we are today based on estimates today. We'll see the details here in a minute, but on a $77 million package, we'll see a peak of about 47 cents, which is actually 6 cents below the peak we estimated in 2016. Mm-hmm. And if we go as far as a $120 million package, about a 49.5 cent peak on the debt service, which is 3.5 cents below the 2016 estimate. So this is a chart showing the 3 different packages. So we're showing our debt service starting in 2018, running through 2028. And we've got some assumptions in there for assessed valuation growth over the years. believe the tax year 2017 number is an actual number, 2018 is an actual number, and the rest of them going forward from there are estimates. And so then the next column is no bond election. That's where we see our current debt service rate peaking at 44 cents. If we move to the $77 million package, we will see that peak at 47 cents over a little bit later time period and a little bit longer period. And then the $90 million peaking at 48 cents, and then the full $120 million package peaking at 49.5 cents. So looking at those in comparison to our current peak without doing the 2019 bond package, we see a 3 cent, a 4 cent, or a 5.5 cent increase to do this bond package. And just backing up one slide, that's much less than where we projected we would be with the 53 cents we were projecting a couple of years ago. So we've done very good with new bond sales, refinancing of our debt, and with our assessed valuation growth that's really driving that debt service rate down. All good news. I want to walk through the schedule real quick, and then we'll open this up for discussion and question. And this was put forth in the white paper we looked at earlier this year. Tonight, March, April, we're looking at April, I guess, looking at reviewing the potential list of projects. We want to get some, consensus to move forward with the work on the preliminary engineering. We'll get that work started over the next couple of months. We'll work on that till this fall, and then we'll start reviewing that preliminary engineering report information starting in 2019. Bring those back with final estimates, final list of projects so that we can work through those and have the council complete that final selection of projects. And then in February of 19, call a referendum and have that election in May. Assuming a successful bond election, we would immediately, to try to complete this in a very short period of time, a 5-year window, we would want to start design work on probably 50 to 75% of the approved projects right off the bat. We will develop a much more detailed schedule once we have a final slate of projects. Before we go to the voters, we'll take those projects that we want to move forward with and develop a much more detailed schedule to look at. But we would propose starting most of the design work, at least half to most of the design work immediately. June of 19, look at our first reimbursement resolution to start that design work. And then in 2020, by March, we believe we can have the first projects under construction or awarded for construction. And then in 2020, we would have our first bond sale July of that year. October of 2021, we would start the design on the remaining projects. That would give us the time to be able to get those all under construction by 2022 and complete all construction on all projects by approximately May 2024. Of course, subject to available funds, timing of any matching funds. If we get some of these projects in the tip, we'll have to look at how does that schedule play in. Usually we've got to wait on some of those dollars, as well as we've got to go through some of the federal requirements that drag out road projects. So subject to that on the schedule, plus the volume of any other critical work that we've got to complete in between now and then, and any other projects that are approved by other funding mechanisms. So recommendations tonight is that work through this with you guys and get council to provide some direction on the size of the bond package and the project list. And then we said proceed with PE work on the $120 million package. We recommend doing that whether we are looking at a smaller package or the bigger package. Just in case we go through preliminary engineering, some of those cost estimates come down, or as we approach the bond program, we want to add some projects or rearrange some of the projects that we've got that good vetting of all those projects so we can make those final selections this fall. Not limited to, if we limit it to, doing preliminary work on the $77 million package, we get down to it this fall and decide, oh, that doesn't cost that much, or hey, we want to do a bigger package. We will not have done the preliminary work necessary to make sure we've got good estimates on those. So we want to do those estimates on a bigger package of projects so that we've got a good list to choose from to finalize this fall. With that, we appreciate your time and look forward to feedback and any questions you have tonight. Thank you.
Ernie, why don't we start with you on this? We'll run down through the council chamber.
All right, thank you, Mayor. On the projection for the tax rate effects, what interest rate have we assumed? Or what type of inflation of an interest rate have we assumed for those bond issuance?
Give us a second to.
Okay.
We'll get.
And next up, so when we start off the presentation, we've excluded any projects that fall out of the master drainage plan. When will we have that plan, and does it make sense to talk about maybe a placeholder for some of those improvements?
Councilman Carbone, we're anticipating towards the latter part of this summer, no later than October is our final report, is when it's due. But we'll have information as we're doing the modeling right now as that comes along. There's a couple things is that there could be that option as you so direct. The other one is we can take a look at when those projects are defined and cost estimates developed. There could be a potential for another bond initiative for the drainage projects, or we could reopen the discussion and take a look at a drainage fee that we talked about as a white paper at one point.
Do we have any idea?
I'm kind of shaking my head right now, no, because we're in the midst of doing modeling right now.
Okay.
And I don't have all those results yet.
I think I'd be a fan of a discussion on maybe putting a placeholder in there to provide some funding for some of the higher priority drainage issues. And then also, I guess fill me in on some of the thoughts around the 518 TxDOT project, and assuming that not assuming, but the funding source for that.
Sure. We've been discussing it with TxDOT over the last couple of years, and we've got a meeting coming up with them next week, and they've proposed submitting the project in the TIP, which we would obviously support. What we need to do, the discussion we will have with them next week is what does that look like? Because at one point they asked us the question, would we sponsor the project? And we said, well, explain what that means. I don't think we want to unless it means we're just kind of named sponsor and they're really carrying the project. But there are cost implications typically of a project that size for us, even if we don't participate in the construction of the road. We'll have significant utility relocations that we'll have to do. Those, of course, will be funded out of the water sewer fund. But then, and this is some of the discussion we have to have with them, many times when TxDOT comes in to do an FM type road or State Highway 35, they require a matching fund, usually a 10% matching fund on the right-of-way acquisition from the local government. We don't know if that's something they're going to be looking for. And then we've always discussed with them, if we make a contribution to construction, will it accelerate the project? And, what is that number? And, we have a hard time really getting, kind of TxDOT to commit to something like that. But I think this discussion next week will help nail down a lot of those things. So, at this point, we don't really know what the ask is from TxDOT, whether we would be interested in providing that. And so we want to vet through that over the next few months, see if it gets in the TIP. And then if we do have an obligation there, maybe look at an alternate way of funding that, so that we do have those funds on hand as opposed to subjecting those to an election next year. Since the 518 project is needed, and if TxDOT's got it in the TIP or is picking up, the vast majority of that project, and we've got some contribution to it, that we're able to provide that piece of it without any hesitation.
Basically, don't chance putting it to the voters and getting shot down, since we're going to have so much matching funds coming in.
Yes, sir.
Is that the thought? Okay. And so we're going to move forward, or y'all propose to move forward with the PER and the full 120 million. So the discussion tonight is preliminary. Where do we want to draw the line as to what size?
Yes, sir. I think, we put the 120, I think if the consensus was, a $77 million package, maybe we do, PER on some of the additional projects, maybe not all the way to the 120. But if we go to the larger package, we would recommend going to beyond that on the number of projects we further vet, so that we've got a full slew of projects as we get to the fall and we finalize what the package itself is, the bond package itself is going to be.
Okay. I guess two other comments. Even at the larger package, the projection is still to get all these projects completed within that 5-year window.
That is our plan, to get them started and head towards completion in that timeframe. We want to keep it to that. That was the direction that was given previously, and also not to extend them out. So there will be that responsibility as we go along, is to continue to fund these and not put a pause or a halt in them.
Okay. And what about the O&M effects of these projects coming online? Have we thought through that or projected that?
I believe on most of these, we've looked at the O&M cost and included those in the CIP. But that's something, as we move forward, these projects, since they were, proposed projects and unfunded projects, we really probably need to go back through and really vet through those. I think, we're probably comfortable with what we've got in there for fire stations, since that's really coming to fruition. That's actually on the TIRZ side of things, but some of them have probably been thought through and vetted a little further than others. But I think as we move forward and do the preliminary work, that is a task that we have to complete, is the impacts on the O&M as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you. That's all my comments for now, Mayor.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. More?
So with doing the increase in the debt tax rate, most of these projects are needed projects. Some of it, you could argue if it's a wanted or a needed project, but most of them are needed projects, I think. And what does the raising the debt tax rate do to the tax rate itself? Part of our problem now is that our debt rate is high, so it doesn't allow us money to do a lot of things. So with raising this, say we go for the 120 mil bond at the 0.495, what is that going to do to the tax rate to help pay for the debt rate?
I'll take a stab at that. As you know, the operating O&M rate for the city's general fund is independent of this, but we all realize that it totals up to a grand total. So the operating debt cap, we've traditionally in the last few years gone to at or near the statutory 8%, and that's driven purely by valuations and what we can get in under that. As council, we all have the option of going lower or higher than that, and the implications of that. So, we realize in at budget time we bring those to you as the total. But it really, we're not in a position to be able to say, especially this far out, what that does with the valuations, just because of the growth and how that changes things.
Okay. I guess my other comment would be, I think that we ought to have some of these drainage projects on here as priorities also, and that they should have a placeholder in there. And my concern with that is we do go out for the bond. I don't think that a bond for drainage projects really is a seller. So if we did a bond and it was only for drainage issues, a lot of people probably are not going to be concerned about that unless they live in one of those areas that it's a problem. So I would think that it'd have a less likely chance of passing. So if we can get some of these priority drainage projects in with this bond, with some of the other things, I think it would be a much better bond package. And then my last comment is on the 518 expansion with TxDOT. 35, there was problems with that. We all know there's issues with that, but it took a long time to get 35 done, and a lot of businesses on 35 suffered during that construction time period. So any power or persuasion that we have with TxDOT, I would like to utilize to the fullest to push them to get the project done and not let it linger.
Councilman Reed?
Thank you, Mayor. I don't have much, kind of off of what Councilmember Moore stated. Just looking at some of these projects, I'm not really sure how attractive they're going to be to the public. And if the goal is to get this bond passed, as much as I would hate to change the fire station or any other project that's already included in that TIRZ presentation that you all sent us, it sounds like maybe that might be something that would be a bigger push, like a library. I think people would be kind of turned off, though, because of what happened with the last bond and, us waiting 8 to 10 years before actually executing on things. So, I guess what I'm saying is marketing is going to be important for this and looking at actually getting it passed. These are good projects, and we know because we're here, been listening to it for the past 3 years plus and knowing what it takes to get this stuff done. We need a bond, but we need the voters. And so, I don't know if we want to think about or consider shifting some things around, to put something else at the head of this bond. But I can tell you some of the questions that are going to come when this bond comes out and people don't see things like, a library or something else that they think is important is, hey, where's that at? And that they're not going to have seen that TIRZ presentation. And so it's probably important that we think about those things and not just what's going into the bond, but how we're going to get it passed. Other than that, as far as the projects, I think the projects are necessary. Hopefully we've learned from our mistakes from the last 2007 bond, and we're actually doing things that we can actually execute on and get done, as opposed to throwing a bunch of stuff in there that's not possible or may not be possible down the line because of the cost of materials or change in whatever may happen. And so obviously we can't predict the future, but the hope is to actually get these things executed and done. And so that's really all I have. Right now I can't think of any additional projects that may need to be added in or if we were to scrap some things or had to, or if we need to scrap some things, then I guess that'd be another meeting or something that we would go through. Or is that something that you all wanted direction on right now?
I think if there were projects that there was a consensus to move into the program that's not shown, or ones to move out, or rearrangement of any of the priorities, that we would appreciate that feedback tonight as well.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I'll keep looking.
If that's the case, then I'd like to have you take a look at Fight Road from Cullen to McLean. The road's gotten a lot more traffic on it, and the road's getting worse and worse.
Mayor, if I can follow up on what Councilman Reed was saying, if you look at this list or even expand out to the $120 million bond package, what projects are west of 288? It makes sense tonight when we have the TIRZ discussion, but when we're out presenting this and anybody asks whether they live on the east or the west side, they ask how much is on the east of 288 and how much is on the west. That's a tough one. And the TIRZ financing, it certainly makes sense, but this is a PR nightmare in trying to explain that. I've sat on the development authority that deals with the TIRZ for a couple of years before it all clicks. So trying to prepare a elevator speech to try to get a chance to get some votes is going to be difficult. So I'm not saying we need to add something just to add something to spend the money, but that's, we can all sit up here and not say it, but let's talk about it now because that's what we're going to get faced with.
Well, just remind us, we can't market this.
Right.
Well,
One of the things that was included in the information when we did the 2007 bond package was projects there were either matching funds or other sources of funds to do those projects. So, it was kind of looked at as more of the, here's the CIP and then here's the projects that need to be, that would be part of a referendum.
Councilmember Ward knows you're right. We can't market this, and we're just giving staff direction. And I think staff can't market it either, but staff has to put this out there for vote. Somebody, you call a spade on the west side of 288, is going to ask, well, where's the library at? Otherwise, they probably could give, excuse me, but two shits about everything else that's going on. So when you think about projects and you're trying to get votes and you want this thing to pass, I mean, it's just like every one of us working for votes for ourselves, I mean, at the end of the day, none of this is attractive. I mean, I'm not saying it's not attractive and these things don't need to be done, but if there's some way to switch some things out. Now, with that being said, the library would be one of the bigger draws over there. But I'm afraid of something happening. And I mean, the TIRZ is very attractive. I don't think we should add anything, like Councilmember Carbone said, just to be adding stuff, just to be paying for something else. Switching something out might be, something that could be done. I'm leery of switching the library out because I don't know how this is going to go and how this is going to play out from a funding standpoint. But it's something that staff may want to think about, whether it be the fire station or the library, something or the other phase of that park. I would think about that when going into this and putting this thing out for vote, because right now the way it looks, it could get some no's, a lot more no's than we want.
Yeah, unfortunately, this side of the city is a lot older and it does require a lot more right now because, everything, on the other side of 288 is fairly new in comparison to some of this stuff. But I agree, it would be a difficult bond for anybody that didn't live in this area that any of these projects were to be.
I think we need to stop focus on which side these projects lie and start focusing on where our greatest needs are and how that plays into the bond.
Because we are structuring the bond. There's another group that will go out and sell the bond. And we're very close to a line that I will not let us cross. Because there are legal implications when we start talking about how a bond is going to pass. Our job as this body is to create the bond and put it out there to the voters and provide information. Any direction or anything that can be looked at as marketing cannot be done by this governmental body.
That's right.
And that's where I'm afraid we could be viewed if this conversation continues to go in the direction it was. And I'm not saying that they're not topics that need to be discussed. I just don't think they're topics this body discusses. Every bond ends up with, or not every bond. Bonds will normally end up with at least one group out there, PAC or whatever else, and that's their job to get that information out. I've sat on too many bonds and worked on too many of them for the school district, and I'm getting a little scared, to be honest. But if I can take my turn, my stab at this. The tax rate's been brought up. Can somebody remind me what the voters approved in the 2007? No.
I think it was pretty good.
11 cents, 13 cents?
Yeah.
I believe it was 9. I think the 13 included the remaining projects from the 2001 bond program.
So 9, and the tax rate has increased how much to complete those? 0 or possibly negative? I just want to put some things in perspective when we're talking about this. What we have to do as a government body is put out what the worst case scenario is for the tax rate. And that I agree, that's what we have to do. The chances of that actually happening in a city that's growing and doing what we're doing is very, very limited. So, and that's going to go into a couple of my other points here. Trying to see what, because when we talk about park equipment, we've had multiple people come up and tell us the want for park, the want for open space and green space. My issue is that's something that at some point we're going to have to get into the normal budget. We're going to have to figure out how to pay for these improvements outside of bond elections, unless we plan on going out every 5 years to 10 years with a bond election. And that, those are the two paths that we can take here. And that goes for the streets as well. I love what we're doing for the streets, but let's be honest, we're not even getting up to funding at the maintenance level that we know we need. And we're doing that with a one-time influx of money, not a reoccurring, which is where we need to end up getting. So there's some deeper topics that I would just like for us to be thinking about as we move forward on this. And I'll state now, the 120 million, there's not a project in there that gives me heartburn that I don't think as a community as a whole we need and will do good things for us and help us to deal with the growth that is coming. So that brings me to the roughly $64 million question on slide 49 of the additional, slide 50 on y'all's, okay. Additional projects. Was this prioritized at all, or is this just kind of?
No, this was just other projects that have been, mentioned or brought into the CIP and looked at in previous years.
I feel better because I couldn't agree with the prioritization. Yeah, I'll get that word out sometime. Of these, off this list, what I'll tell you, let me ask a question first. Hill House, Phase 2, what exactly would that allow us to do out there that we're not currently doing? Do we know yet? I mean, I know it needs to be expanded at some point. I'm just trying to figure out where I put this on this list, because that is traffic control, and I don't think anybody up here will say we need less management of that.
Actually, I couldn't tell you.
When that was originally built, there was a concept to have, some bulk material storage and pipe material storage facilities on that site, so that we would have access to that on basically central.
Kind of an annex type situation for street main or for public works.
Yes, sir.
Got you. So for me, I'll be honest, my top one of this list is the Dixie Farm, the 35 to Pearland sites, and that's probably going to be one of the more difficult ones, but I've said it multiple times. Dixie Farm is our only connection to 45. And the more we can do to help move some of the traffic that wants to get to that area of Houston, I think the better off we are. But that's our only direct connection, into that 45 Gulf Freeway corridor. So I put that one towards the top of my list. After that, they fall a little bit. Old Alvin, McCard to Knapp. I see the need for it. I'm not sure once I get past McCard how much of that traffic, but that's probably my next one on this list. So I guess I want us to kind of look at this list and give staff direction. Do we want to see some more of these on there? Do we want to look at $160 million, 120, 160, 200? What does that number realistically look like? We know in 2007 the voters said, here's 9 cents, and we didn't use that. So, I'll be honest, I don't think the voters of Pearland are going to vote down a bond election when they see the street improvements, they see what we're giving them. I think there's very few people that would look at this list and say we don't need these things. And that's where I get mad at the people at the state that keep telling me people don't want their property taxes raised. And I get that, but I also look, and almost every bond election that's put out to the voters passes in overwhelming numbers. So when the voters see what they're getting, I think overwhelmingly they support
Right.
those facilities. But I do really want us to think about, I mean, to me, streets are just underfunded in this. It's a way to move us along a little bit more, but I think there's a whole lot more that can be done when we look at our asphalt and our older streets and trying to get those to curb and gutter and something that's going to be a better long-term investment for the community. And I'll leave it at that for right now.
Okay, there. Res?
Brace yourself. I'm gonna be a bit. I've got a lot of I got a lot of thoughts on this. Obviously, I want to try and condense them as best I can, but not to skirt down the other road that we were going on. We need, as a body, to prioritize our needs and go out to the voters and say these are our greatest needs. If we're doing a good job, that should be obvious. Playing politics with our needs, I don't think is something that we should be doing, particularly from here. With respect to the projects, yeah, we're good.
Yeah.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. I will come back. I thought we had one more. Sorry.
Cross your legs.
Let's start with 518 because I think that's the biggest need citywide, and I know it's a TxDOT project. But at this point, TxDOT's only scope is from 288 to McLean, correct? That's the only thing that they're actively.
288 to 35 is what they're doing the environmental on. When I spoke to their assistant district engineer last week, he said they have given the go-ahead to start design work on that full segment from 288 to State Highway 35. It'll be split into two segments, 288 to Cullen and Cullen to 35. And the timeline they're still in the early environmental stages. They've completed kind of the alignment study and they've got to go through the rest of the environmental approval. So their timeline on starting that design work is starting about a year from now.
Okay. So they've expanded from McLean to 35 since the last public meeting. It's the last public meeting I'm aware of was.
Yeah, it was. Yeah, that's McLean as well. Yes, yeah, right. So the original scope was 288 to right there, McLean, Walnut, that intersection. They have expanded those limits since then, and now what's actually on the books is all the way to 35.
And we think that we'll get feedback in time, but our contribution would need to be in time for us to put this to bond, or we're hoping.
It's possible.
Okay.
The call for projects starts in June and runs through the end of July. And, we'll really need to know from TxDOT before then how they want to package this thing up and submit it in the tip call. They'll likely submit it as two separate projects, 288 to Cullen and Cullen over to 35. I think that makes sense. If we look at our Northern Brazoria County Pearland strategic initiative study that was done several years ago, it split them up that way, and that segment between 288 and Cullen was the highest ranked project basically in Northern Brazoria County, which includes Alvin all the way north to Harris County. So, we want to use that as something to push that project, and I think so it makes sense to split them, get that piece. I think it has a much higher chance of getting funded fully, and then we'll take our chances with the other one. We'll kind of understand what TxDOT wants at that point, but whether it gets selected in the tip call for projects, the schedule is that that'll be made this fall. track record with the tip call for projects is that it'll be much later than that. The last call, I think it took 9 months for the project selection after the call ended. So it could be as early as this fall that we know. It could be, next spring before we know whether the project's been selected.
So by the time we're getting into the bond election, we should have, or we could possibly have enough information to where if we don't have an exact cost, we could start bracketing costs that we could include into the bond.
We could.
Okay.
And I think that's a definite option.
I think obviously we need some investment into that. I don't think there's any roadway that gets more complaints than 518 along the entire stretch. So I think we do need to have a contingency plan if we don't know the budgetary number, how we're going to be able to legally be able to put a value in there so that we can get it included in the bond. The other ones I want to discuss a little bit. Mimosa Acres, we've kind of dwindled that down to just a drainage project. Roadside ditch improvements, new culverts, new driveways where necessary. And to be frank, I just don't, for that area and for its age, that's just not enough. Cherry Street, we've heard many people come in here and talk about the condition of that road and its necessity to be improved. Basically, that whole subdivision, the roadways are in complete disrepair. It's a reminder to have two citizens that live on the Orange Street, Linwood area, for me to believe that we need to start investing more in some of these areas where we've got older roads that need drainage and roadway improvements. And I'll be frank with you, I think if we went out there and just cleaned out the ditches and replaced the culverts and didn't touch the road, those citizens would be extraordinarily upset with us, as the ones on Orange Street were extraordinarily upset with us every time we overlaid. I'm not saying that not to trivialize the need for improvements within the ditch, but I think that entire subdivision needs to be rebuilt, and we need to be looking at that project in a holistic scope as opposed to continuing to piece it one part at a time. We do a water line, we're going to come back and we do a sanitary sewer line, now we're going to come back and do some drainage, and then someday we may actually fix their real concern, which is the roadway conditions. So I feel like Mimosa Acres the scope of Mimosa Acres needs to be expanded. Potentially West Leah, but Mimosa Acres I think definitely has some long-term roadway issues that need to be fixed. Chief Riley, if I could pick your brain for a second. On the training facilities, let's see, where were the burn building phase 1? I guess kind of help me understand. I don't want to trivialize the benefit of having training facilities here, but help me to kind of understand how much of a need that may be, how much of a want that may be. What if any replacement options we have? Do we have other nearby cities that have a similar facility and we go train over there? Would there possibly be a revenue component to that by we build this facility and other cities can come and train with us and potentially pay some fee to be able to do that? Or would we just offer it to them as good neighbors? Help me understand that project a little better.
That project is 2 phases. The volunteer fire department, I believe 20 years ago, actually outlined that whole piece of property and how it's to be used, and it's a great plan. The engineering's been done, the drainage has been done. So really it's a matter of putting in some more roadways and some projects. Structure fires are high-risk, low-frequency events. It's critical that we train on those with live fire as much as we can. The current facility is a great facility in terms of going up and down stairs and there's a lot of training that can be done there. However, the burn room itself is very small and it doesn't give us the ability to train like we were actually going into a house fire. We have looked at other facilities in the area. Houston has one up the road. However, they use it to train 4,000 firefighters, and it's very difficult for us to schedule something. And when we do, we would have to pay overtime for people to go up there to do the training. So could we lease it out or rent it out? Certainly that's a possibility. We'd have to explore that with other people. Other departments in the area. And I'm sorry, you had one other question. I lost it.
I think you've answered enough. And let me just kind of be blunt, and hopefully you'll give me a blunt answer. Would you say, and I'd say honestly, I think I can predict your answer, but I'll ask anyway. Would you say that's an imperative need of our fire department?
Yes.
Okay. On the projects associated with the $120 or $120 million value, Hughes Ranch from Cullen to Stone. I still think that's a high priority. I don't think we should be considering any component of that negotiable. That's our east-west corridors and the necessity for continuing to expand our volume capacity from east to west and west to east needs to be a high priority, because that's what's leading to continue to lead to congestion on 518. Even with the roadway expansion, we'll have congestion in that area if we don't have alternate corridors. It also opens up development corridors that helps us with additional value. That's why McCart is very important. But traffic-wise, I think I personally feel Hughes Ranch Road should be a higher priority. The animal shelter, is that project intended to be built in the current location, or is that intended to be relocated? Or do we know yet?
The intent is for that to be relocated out of the Public Works facility.
Somewhere more central to the city?
Yes, sir.
Okay. But we don't have an existing piece of land that we already have or have already identified?
We have some ideas that we're looking at. One of them is taking a look at some of the extra land at Hill House, at the Hill House complex, and putting them there. That's a central location. There's also some talk about area existing to the PSB facility as well. And so we're looking in those central areas, seeing if we have land that we may already own that could be utilized.
But more likely than not, or less likely than not, that land acquisition would be part of that project.
Okay. We are looking forward to, we pulled a bunch of the money out of land acquisition out of there, trying to go towards city-owned property already.
Okay. The Independence Park project, the next phase, I saw some language in there about doing a conversion of the existing community pool that's out there. Did Chris already leave?
I can answer.
Oh, there he is. Hey, your timing's perfect. So is the idea, I read there was a description of converting that to a water park. Is that leaving the existing lap pool and then adding features around it, or is that converting it completely? To my best understanding, I don't know if that pool's ever been widely used, and I'd like to see some. I'd be encouraged if that project includes some reassessment of that component of the park.
This is Independence Park?
Yes, sir.
Just making sure. It's an assessment of the use of that, not just that pool as the way that it sits, but kind of the needs of the community and the trends of outdoor recreation. Right now, the step that we can look at for that component may be a lease type agreement to make sure that we have additional users in there for that, and this could possibly be in addition to, or if that agreement doesn't work out, it could be in lieu of. So right now we're looking kind of at both of those opportunities and see what best serves both the bottom line and the community.
On Pearland Parkway, I'm pleased to see we're kind of moving away from the extensive nature of the Super Street. I just didn't think that works well with the recent changes on that road. I am interested to know how we would package the Forest Park traffic signal. Would that be inclusive? The idea, would that be inclusive of the circle redesign? Would that be all one package and everything done at once, or would we do the circle first and then let the traffic calm and then see how large a priority the signal is and do it reactively?
I'd rather try and take the proactive approach more so than that, but it'd be looking at two separate packages because having a design to do a traffic signal is, I don't say relatively simple, but it's one facet, whereas doing the analysis to determine the roundabout, finding that engineering firm that has the experience, that'd be one package on its own. Just take a look at that and run from there.
And that signal would be exclusive of anything that we're doing as far as the additional roadway improvements on Pearland Parkway, or would that be all one package? We do the signal, we do some median openings or median closings or a reevaluation of the median configuration on Pearland Parkway.
We'd be looking at my plan or my thoughts on that would be the traffic signal and then take a look to see if there is any corridor improvements that are necessary or not. But focusing back on the direction that council has given with regards to taking a look at leaving things open or moving forward with that to continue to move traffic most efficiently, and what does that look like? So there will be some review of existing openings, but the traffic signal is there.
But we feel confident there's enough justification for that Forest Park signal to include it in this bond package because it's an eventuality.
That's part of our PER analysis. We'll do a formal warrant study on that as per our traffic manual and TUMTDC and get that taken care of that way. That'll give the formal review. Right now, we're just looking at it at our own projections of what we see.
I'd just say my biggest concern is what a signal and the delay introduced by a signal there does to the traffic circle because they're so close to each other, and whether we need to do the circle first and then hold off and see what traffic patterns are before. Right? I mean, I don't disagree with the proactive approach. I just don't know if I want to go out and specifically state that this needs to be done now without knowing what the other two projects have done to traffic in that area.
Councilmember, one of those things is that's modeling. That's part of that modeling program to determine how traffic reacts. You do the traffic signal first. What does it put when you put the roundabout in, or vice versa? That would be that model we need to take a look at. But that's what we tackle as part of our PE.
Fair enough. On the PERs that we want to do, this kind of bleeds into the conversation we had before. How far ahead do we want to be on the PER? I mean, are we looking at, if it's a facility project, survey and 30% plans? Are we looking at just schematic design with, very few architectural renderings, just enough to be able to go to market and get an idea of what the price might be? On some of the linear projects, are we looking at doing field surveys and doing actual 30% engineering?
The plan moving forward is our focus is conceptual investigation. As Mr. Epperson had stated before, was taking a look at using existing LiDAR that we have, existing surveys that we have, so that way we're not having to redo all that survey at a later date, but focus more conceptually on that, get our renderings that we need, but then focus on our cost estimates and make sure cost estimates, drainage studies, et cetera, all those things that play into a project as a whole. But focus there and focus our funds towards that, those cost estimates, drainage needs, et cetera, for a project.
Okay. I want to touch on something that Member Ordno had mentioned, because I agree with him 100%. Using bond money and bond timing to do routine maintenance is just not a good idea. I know why staff is presenting it. I'm not critical of staff for putting it on there. It's really the only tool that they can put in the toolbox right now. I know we're working on a street and drainage enterprise fund. My concern is this: one, we can't keep going in and trying to do these one-off influxes of cash to try and do a little bit of maintenance on a few roads. We need to have a better long-term plan to continue to improve these roadways and in these drainage corridors more aggressively than we have. I think that's why, frankly, the enterprise fund, the road and drainage enterprise fund's a necessity at this point, and not really, or at least I would hope that the citizens would see it as a necessity and not really an option. If we continue down the path we are with the street and drainage fund, would we be able to get that onto that referendum onto a ballot by? Are we looking at May 19 to have that? And would that timing be the same as the bond? Would we be looking to add the enterprise fund and the bond on the same ballot?
What we're working on right now is we presented some of that information back in January with the early budget input. What Robert and his group is working on now is basically a business plan for the drainage fee, and taking a look at in our 2019 budget what we would need to do to prep that for a election if we went that direction. And so I think in 19, there's a possibility of going. We've got a lot of work to do before then. But we're planning on having that kind of business plan ready for budget discussions this year, and then see if the council wants to move forward with something like that with an election in the next year, and then establish that fund and be able to start funding projects moving forward with that.
Okay.
Just a little bit more detail on the maintenance portion, or the street reconstruction program as proposed in the 2019 bond program. Of course, when we did our road assessment and our pavement condition index to keep us where we are today, we're looking at about $4 million a year. Of course, we fund somewhere around $1 million, $1.3 million, occasionally a little bit more. And so, of course, that looks at another $2 million and some change. So it is kind of something to help us try to get that other side of things, the O&M side of things, up to where it needs to be over the next 5 years. And then we'll still have some work to do to really get it where it needs to be. But this piece of it would look at projects that show up on our pavement condition index that are basically beyond going out and doing crack sealing or an overlay or some sort of maintenance program, chip seal, those type of maintenance programs. This program would really look at the streets that have fallen so far in their pavement condition index that they need to look at a full reconstruction, whether it be a full redepth reclamation and base up and overlay with asphalt, or whether we look at some select ones to convert to concrete curb and gutter, or our concrete curb and gutter program, which with current funding, we almost do no pavement repairs on concrete streets, and we've got a lot of those backing up on us. And we see, as the older subdivisions start to age, where we're going to have to start doing significant panel repairs and segments of those road repairs. So that's that's why we felt comfortable with it in a bond program, because it's, instead of your 5 to 7 year, 3 to 7 year maintenance type programs like crack sealing, joint sealing, overlays, it's really more of a reconstruction, a complete recapitalization of that asset that would, does work with the long-term bonds, because it's a long-term recapitalization of that asset.
Yeah, and I think personally, the east side of town, the older sections of town, that's the only maintenance that we should be doing. We should be generally out of the asphalt business when it comes to our roadways. And I know that the best process right now to get a better roadway surface for some of these older roads is the overlay. It's the cheapest way. It's what we did. Why we just did it on Harkey. But it's over time, it just continues to cause us problems. The overlays have effect on the roadways that have drainage issues, particularly when they're elevated. They're higher roads, and they're higher with respect to the homes. And I think that I'd much rather take $10 million in bond and put it into a roadway that we know needs expansion, like Bailey and some of the other roads that are more in need of expanding for the traffic through capacity, and continue to chase our tails with bonds on these roadway maintenance. And hopefully, if the citizens will agree, allow us to get some more robust funding for our roadway. And I commonly hear staff refer to it as the drainage fund, but we're not focusing on that just being a drainage enterprise fee, right? We're looking at streets and drainage as part of one enterprise fee, correct?
I think, technically it would be a drainage fee. The way we would look at it is where we have drainage issues or drainage things we need to address or undersized pipe, that often, like with Mimosa Acres, you've got to, you're going to have to remove and replace the streets to put that infrastructure back in place. And so that's a proper use of that drainage free funds in those instances.
Not to get too much in the weeds in that, but in theory, we'd say we'd have to have a drainage problem to improve the road. It couldn't be isolated to just a roadway issue to be able to utilize that fee.
No, to look at that, we'd have to look at either some type of road assessment or a road impact fee.
I mean, I think personally that's the direction we need to go with that. If we're going to do this if we're going to do this in 19, that's where I've always envisioned it, and that's what I've encouraged us to do, is be able to independently do a drainage project without doing a road, independently do a raid project without doing drainage, or do both if necessary. But pull as much of the street maintenance off of the general fund, and certainly not try and avoid bonding it. I think if this is what we have to do now, this is what we have to do now, but this is not a long-term solution, continuing to go off bonds. It's the only tool we have. I know why staff is doing it, but us up here have to find a better way to fix those problems. That's all I have. I would just be mindful of the fact that there is conversations at the state level about changing the process or the requirements on bond elections. I know that the governor has said that he'd like bond elections to require a supermajority as opposed to a simple majority. Who knows if that's going to happen? Who knows the likelihood of that going to happen? But if it does, and we don't have this passed, we're done. So I think we need to be focused on getting this in sooner rather than later. I think the direction is for us to put it to the citizens, not negotiate with ourselves, put it with the citizens for the 120 million. Let them tell us whether they want it or not, as opposed to negotiating down and losing the opportunity. That's all I have to say, Mayor. Sorry.
Woody, any leftover questions?
I forgot what we was here for. Now, just a couple of things. I think, from my point of view, I'd do the 120 million, to be honest with you. I think it's time to do that. I think the citizens, if it's brought up correctly and shown on some of the meetings that we'd have for a bond issue, that they would go for it. A lot of the drainage after coming through Harvey, I think, that's a positive thing that people would want to do on that. I think also, and I think I've mentioned that to you, Trent, some of the areas that we have concrete streets in the older subdivisions don't need to be rebuilt, but they do need point repairs done throughout the subdivision. And I think, that would hold them for a number of years that point repairs need to be done on concrete roadways that we have. As far as 120 million is when you go back and you look at the bond election to do that, you're only looking at 0.4950 increase in it, but after 4 years it starts coming back down on there, and I think that's a good thing to do. Mentioning one of the things that Trent said about the pool over here in Independence. When we first done that, we were doing the natatorium at the same time. And people come up and they say, well, we can't afford to pay the dues to go to the natatorium and take our kids over to swim. And that's why we done the repairs on the pool over there to keep it open, so everybody in the city could use it. But that was the normal thing that came out through there. on there. But that's pretty well most of what I've got on it, to do that. I think if we're going to go out and do it, we might as well do what we really need to do within the projects, within the city. And I think, divide it up correctly and put the information in. And I think also if there's information that goes in there, what we're going to be doing in the tours, also as just a point of interest of trying to sell the bond issue, I think, that would go a long way. But I believe, really, if we're going to do it, and I think there's a lot of other streets and stuff that need to be done, but I think that being able to go through there and doing the 120 million at this time, I think it's the right thing for us to do.
Let me ask staff a couple of questions that one is help me with my memory on one of them, but on the debt service impacts, it just had three options on that. One of them was under the assessed valuation. Why is that going down about 1% from 2020 down to 27? It goes from 6% down to 1%. What is that? What's affecting that?
Mayor, that's our,
Building up our growth, all my growth coming in.
Mayor, that's our assumption on assessed valuation growth. So they're, early years, a little bit higher, but as we get out further, just to be conservative on what those growth factors are, they decrease. We want to cover that right now.
Yeah, and also to follow up on Councilmember Carbone's question, we're looking at a very conservative 4%, most of the time up to about 5.25%. So very conservative rate on the interest rates.
Okay. And the other question I have, you had last election I attended was 07, and I've forgotten this, if the take the 77, I think it was, you had up a while ago. The bond issue for 70, I think it's 77.
I'm sorry, sir. What was the question?
The slide for the projects in the $77 million list.
The one you had up there previously, I just, yeah, 77 package, yeah. When we go out and vote on this item, refresh my memory. Do we have a bottom line? You either agree to all of them or none of them? Or do you take each one of them separately on the ballot? Is each one of those going to be a separate check mark on the ballot?
Sir, what we would propose is similar to what we did in the last couple of bond elections, and that is we would package these up into specific categories of projects. So we would likely have a drainage component, or one initiative be drainage, one referendum for streets, another for facilities.
Okay.
And what am I missing? And another one for
list
parks.
Several,
Yes, sir.
Several streets under the
And
street.
as done in 2007, where there are some specific projects that are mentioned, they can be used on for other road projects. And as we saw in 2007, as we got federal funds, 80% on several of those projects in the 2007 package, we were then able to put in matching funds on other projects and accomplish other projects without COs or other debt.
Yeah. When you go to the ballot, you're going to have a check mark on each one of these. You got to vote yes or no, right?
By project category, yes, sir.
Okay, by project category, by streets, not like it is on the screen right now.
No, sir. When we come back and we start to finalize the package, we'll look at them in their distinct
Have
packages.
streets and then have the streets under it.
Sure. We'll have streets,
Okay.
we'll have drainage, facilities, and parks.
I was trying to remember because 2007 was a long time ago. But I think a lot of the questions were good. I think one of them sort of caught my attention was the one about some of these are really grab your attention and say, yeah, I want one of those. And a lot of these are sort of, I hear too many people say, what do we spend all our money on parks for? And we got enough roads in town. What are we spending money on roads? And so a lot of that question will come up with a a lot of these, like the $77 million package, it's got it's a lot of a bunch of not very attractive items on there, but but all of them are extremely needed. And our capital improvements plan over the next 5 years has a whole bunch of these items that we need to address as we continue growing at the rate we're going. So, just a comment. I don't know the answer is required. Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Is there,
You have,
no, did you have a comment?
you going to comment?
No, sir.
Okay, good.
Is what I'm hearing from everybody up here, we're happy with the 120? And that other list we don't want to look at? Because what I'm hearing on interest rates, what I've seen happen with bonds since high school was what, 88? You know, and the way we figure these is, I'll be honest, I'm willing to bet that we're not going to see a tax increase because of this. As the current debt's paid off and the values go up, it'll even out, or the rate will actually go down. So are we comfortable with that 120, or do we want to look at doing more? Because I think the other end result's just going to be more bond issues. I don't think that, I don't think this body will do M&O tax rates that will get us to where we don't need these bonds. I don't think we honestly can, and I think the state will continue to make it more difficult. And if that happens, if anybody wants to move to Belize with me, that sounds like not a bad idea if they tell us it's supermajority to pass bond elections, because I don't want to see what this state's going to look like in 40 years. But, I mean, can we weigh in on this? Are we happy at the 120, or are there projects in that other list or other projects we want to look at?
What's your 120 on the screen?
I'd say, to be blunt, Member Ordno, you're not going to be here, so your opinion is not as relevant. I mean, but no, I understand. We've got two over here that will be here. We both said we want 120. We only have two on the other end that are present, so I think if they would weigh in and help give staff some direction on how to move forward, or at least comment that they don't wholly object to it, I think that would be beneficial to staff.
I don't wholly object to the 120. I would anticipate, after hearing some comments, that would probably increase for some sort of placeholder for some drainage, or at least have that discussion in the future. And I think our original direction to staff was, let's keep it at 70 so that it's a manageable, because we're coming off the last bond referendum that was out of 07. So the thought being, let's keep it a little bit smaller, get it approved, get it done, and then turn around and go back for another one. So, I mean, staff heard us, that's what they've done, and now it sounds like we're going to a different direction, saying, hey, let's almost double that.
Yeah, I guess I wouldn't wholly object either, but yeah, part of that was the last bond. It was told to us that some of it was that it was such a big bond package that some of it did take a little bit longer to get done. So that was the direction that we gave them, that we wanted to do smaller ones so that we could get the projects done quicker. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of stuff that needs to be done, and like we said, we don't have the money to do everything, and part of my issue is with the debt rate being so high that we do have to go for bonds and probably a lot more frequently than we should. But if we can get that debt paid down, then we have more free money to do the things that we should be doing and need to be doing to keep this city the way that everybody wants it to be. So I wouldn't wholly object to it if it bought us a few more years. And I don't know, looking at the list there, it extends it out a little bit further, but it doesn't start coming down again until like 2028, puts us back to like 0.46, where we're at 0.44 now. And that's, I mean, 2028 gets us, almost back to where we are now, and we get a lot of benefit out of it. But again, I wouldn't wholly object to it. So,
Well, looking at the schedule, really, this is the meeting to decide that.
Well, I think we
It's
could,
review of potential projects is March, April, and award, and they start moving forward May, June. So
I think that at least what I'm hearing is we don't necessarily have 4 votes for the 120. We definitely have potentially 4 votes for the 70. So it may make sense for staff to continue to separate the 77 and the additional projects to the 120 until we fully approve it, but they could move forward with PER and assessments for every project within the 120 bond package so that they can continue to vet and give us better information.
well, can we see the projects that take us to 120? The next slide. Can we knock any of those off?
I've heard
And I'm looking at that end of the table because y'all were. I'm just trying to get some traction and movement going here, one way or another.
Yeah, I've heard more adding than there's subtracting. But
I mean, I'd be okay with that. I even added one tonight to take a look at, and that was Fight Road. So,
I mean, I want to see as this progresses with the PER and we see what the O&M costs are, I think we have to take that into account as well. At the end of the day, I don't want to sit up here and have a $200 million bond, and then staff's going to come back and say, hey, we need to raise our O&M to increase staffing because all these new projects are coming on and you want them done within 5 years. So I think there's a size that makes sense. And as of all the information given right now, I think it makes sense to look at that 120. But what I heard from the very beginning is staff wants to move forward with the PERs for all 120, no matter what we say tonight, and we can fine tune that as this process goes along.
well, I think if we told them no, we're not looking at anything over 77 million. There's no point in them wasting their time on projects beyond that. But if we're okay with them looking at it, then that gives them some direction.
I just don't want to waste time.
So if I could summarize a few things just to make sure we've got everything covered. Yes, our recommendation was that, and it sounds like there's general consensus to do that. We do have the O&M impacts that we want to take a look at. We've got that on the list. We'll also look at, whether or not we do a placeholder for drainage projects. Wanted to see if there's enough support for looking at the Fight Road project from Cullen to McLean to what we do preliminary work on. Is that, we got?
Also, roadway replacement of Mimosa
I'm getting
acres.
there. I'm getting there. I'm just kind of going one by one to see if, yes, sir. So do we have enough support to look at Fight Road? It is one we've looked at.
Do you have on the CIP how much that was? Do we have that a project at all?
I don't know that we've got a cost estimate on that, but we can develop that cost estimate so that it can be looked at in conjunction with the rest of the projects.
I didn't see it on the CIP.
No, it's not even on the CIP. So,
No.
I mean, no offense, but I have trouble looking at that one and not looking at what's on the CIP and what's in this other list. And the same thing goes for Mimosa. I mean, I would love to do all those, but what good does the CIP do if every time we have a pet project, we're going to throw that in front of the CIP? And that's my issue with it. It's not that I don't want to do them. It's just I think we have these tools for a reason, and I think too often we throw the tool away.
So one of the things we did look at is on Fight Road, some of the pavement condition index in there, and it's got segments down in the 20s and the 30s, so very low. So that is a road we likely will be looking at for an asphalt overlay, probably a base up and somewhat of a reconstruction from an asphalt standpoint anyway, within the time frame of this bond package, if not sooner. So just a little additional information on Fight Road that we may be looking at if we don't look at it in this package.
I'm not saying skirt the CIP. I'm just saying if we're adding stuff and we're doing a bond, then, let's take care of some of the stuff that needs to be done.
I understand, but we have items in front of that we prioritized, and that's my issue is when we take items that and aren't even on the CIP and skip them. I just have heartache because I don't think you're talking about the asphalt, which is what we'll be doing.
Any improvement would be better than what it is.
Okay, well, I mean, if we're happy with an asphalt, I think that can be done partially at least, as we move. But if we're looking at actually widening to match it to what we just did, that's a totally different project. So
No, I'm not looking at widening it, just getting some relief on some of that road because it's pretty bad.
we had two different things.
Yeah, well,
Trent, you got some on here to possibly look to go on the TIP program, right?
Yes, sir. There are six road projects we've developed preliminary work on so that we've got good cost estimates. We've got the information we need to submit into the TIP. We want to have the discussion with TxDOT on the 518 project before we get back in front of you guys here in the next month or so. We'll have to be back in front of you probably in June to get a resolution passed supporting all the projects we submit in the TIP, and probably a separate resolution supporting the state getting funding for 518. So that's all in here. We'll be coming back and specifying which those projects are to get your approval of a resolution supporting those here in the next month or so.
Okay. So if we go to the 120 and we get some of them on the TIP and actually go through it, it'd be less than that, but,
Yes, sir. And, depending on the timing of the TIP call and decision period, we may know that before we go out for the bond election. We may not. It's hard to tell. The TIP call usually takes significantly longer than originally planned. Going down the rest of my kind of list is that Dixie Farm Road was mentioned. We've already done some of the preliminary engineering on that one, so we've got information on it if we want to consider that again when we look at the final list of projects this fall. We will on 518 we'll have these meetings with TxDOT so we can bring back to you guys kind of what that number looks like and whether you want to include that in a bond program. So Mimosa Acres is another one where we need to if we want to look at that as a road reconstruction project as well as the drainage project. My guess is that I haven't looked at that, is we would be doing this drainage project and then looking at those roads in our asphalt road project rehabilitation within the next few years, kind of in conjunction with that drainage project. But if we wanted to do something beyond that, a conversion to concrete stream and gutter, we'd kind of need to know that now so that we could look at that as opposed to just the drainage in this package of projects. So is there a desire to look at that project as a concrete curb and gutter along with the drainage improvements?
so I would say yes. I don't think it's beneficial, and I don't think that the people who drive those streets or are affected by the drainage on a regular basis are going to appreciate us coming in and deepening the ditches and increasing the size of the culverts without doing the roadways. And I think, to be honest with you, we're throwing good money after bad, trying to do half of this road or a piece of these roads at a time. So I would very much like to see at least the collectors on that street be curb and gutter, and the drainage improvements be subsurface storm sewer conveying the 100-year rather than ditch improvements. Maybe some of the local streets that connect to Cherry and the other collectors in the area, or roads that should be collectors, maybe those can be minimized to just drainage. But I think we need to do more for the roads that are in severe disrepair out there.
Clay, you getting any guidance on this?
I think Trent's trying to drive us towards a few things.
And I think, we could take a look at, when we do this preliminary work, we could take a look at, a combination of those things and the incremental cost of those, so that we could bring it back as, here's the drainage project alone, here's the hybrid, here's the full.
Yeah, I'd like to see the numbers. And if that's the project where this makes sense. I mean, on Orange, it certainly made sense because the history of the overlays. So there's no way we can afford to convert every asphalt from an overlay to curb and gutter. But if that one is on the top of the list in terms of drainage issues that similar to Linwood can only be solved by going curb and gutter, then I'd be much more in support of it. If we can solve it in other means, and there's other areas that need that as a solution, then I'd rather solve those than the Mimosa Acres at this time.
I'll say, I would argue that you move towards the railroad tracks and you get into the old town site, those have been overlaid more than Mimosa Acres. So, it's just, I understand. I just don't. We get a couple of people that come up and talk and say we want it, and we start adding it. I would like to do it based off numbers, figures, facts. That's where the CIP. If the road index says that's the area that needs it most, that's fine. But just my knowledge of driving that area, living in that area, right now I lean towards let's start at the railroad track and work our way out. Because those are your older roads. They have the same ditches. They have the same drainage problems. They have the same pothole problems. They just aren't vocal.
Okay. Well, I think we'll take a look at that with some options and bring that.
Any other comments or questions?
I think that covers everything that I had as questions or clarifications. And with that, if it sounds like we've got some consensus to move forward with providing information on the full $120 million package of projects, and bring those back as we complete those and look at the final list, as well as some of the other hanging things like 518 and drainage projects later this year. Is there any other?
Thanks. Hey, Janet, wrap up comments?
Nothing on this end, sir. Thanks for your extra time. It's very helpful.
One more thing I think to wrap up is I think we did have consensus with moving forward with the TIRZ budget amendment as well. So appreciate you guys, everybody's time tonight and input, and look forward to moving this bond program forward.
Thanks, sir. That's all we've got, sir.
Good. I think it's been a good night. I think we've made some good choices and some good discussions. So moving to item 3, adjourn. We are adjourned at 9:00.